Hello, everyone. Steve Seitz, and I'm pleased to welcome you back to another episode of Book Talk. Tonight we're going to, you'll have to excuse me there, it's a little bit dry in here. Anyway, for this episode we have with us Albert Boudreau, who has written a book titled The Golden Needle. Now, this novel explores the darker side of euthanasia, safe to say that. And from here, we'll just let Al take it away. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how the novel came to be.
Well, this is quite a departure for me because I'm mainly a nonfiction writer, and I am professionally trained as an aerospace engineer. In fact, I was in the Air Force Research Laboratory until I retired in '06, and then moved to Vermont. And I joined our writers group there at the Champaign Valley Unitarian Universalist Society. And but I've been writing mainly nonfiction, and that's where I feel most comfortable. Now, how did this thing get started? Well, I was in bed, asleep, and I had a dream. And in the dream, I was in a hospital bed, in a hospital, scheduled to be euthanized. I was convinced I should not be.
Yeah.
But there was this nurse that was keeping me there, putting drugs in me, keeping me there, and that was the end of the dream. So I woke up at that point and said, boy, that would make a great novel. So I tried to get somebody else in our writers group to do it. Nancy Means Wright, for one. She's the head of the group.
What's the name of the group, by the way?
Just the Champaign Valley Unitarian Universalist Writers Group.
Okay,
That's
anyway.
all.
But anyway.
We don't have any fancy name.
Okay.
So anyway, Nancy said, go ahead, start the thing, and I'll coach you. And well, Nancy has many, many novels under her belt, so I figured that was good. After completing it, after she read it, she suggested I get it professionally edited. Which I did, and so I'm pleased with it. The editorial comments and guidance were really right on. So I ended up with a product that I really liked. And then at the time, I felt, well, the ebooks are the up and coming thing. So what I should do is put this on as an Amazon ebook. And it was a very simple process. You just basically upload the thing.
Yeah.
Not much. You have to have it in the right format, but other than that, it was pretty straightforward. The problem is when you do that, you're just a small tree in a huge forest.
Yeah.
And many of the trees in that forest are not very healthy.
Yeah.
If I can put it that way.
Yeah, that's fine.
You're competing with a lot of stuff that's been uploaded that, frankly, is not worth reading. And so I didn't really have much luck that way. It didn't sell much. So I went to our Northshire bookstore down in Manchester. And they have a print-on-demand process down there.
Yes. For those of you, excuse me a minute. For those of you who don't know, the Northshire bookstore, located in Manchester, is probably the most influential independent bookstore in the state. I think it's safe to say that. And one of the many services that they offer is publications. They've got something called an espresso machine, which prints out books as needed, on demand, essentially, which has the benefits for the author. Your book is never out of print, and the only people who buy the book are the ones who actually want it. So the onus on you, the author, is to find those people.
Right.
So tell us what it was like to working with Northshire. What did they do for you?
It was a delight, really. I did it all by email. I did visit the store once and I saw the machine, but I didn't talk to anybody about actually doing it. So I got an email address and I started communicating with them. I had to put the book together, and I believe they wanted a PDF format.
Yep.
So I got the thing just as I wanted it, put it in the PDF format, sent it down by email and they put it together. At first, I had a font that was much too small and it was barely readable, and so they worked with me to get a better font and so on. I also told them I wanted to have in the front the book numbers and so on, the ISBN number.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And so they provide that. They provide all kinds of services from basically just starting. You give them a manuscript and they'll help you all the way up to, essentially all I had to do is send the manuscript and they put together the ISBN. I had to provide the covers, the front cover, the back cover, and the spine.
So that's your design?
Yes. So I just did that on my own computer and PowerPoint, and it worked out.
As it happens, I'm one of their editors.
Ah.
And sometimes they'll refer some of their authors to me. And I kind of wish I had this one first, because you raised a really interesting moral dilemma for the villain of the story, but you never quite tell us how he got to that position. We don't want to blow the story. You're going to have to read that for yourself. But I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of that. I would have just guided you a little bit more into the backstory. But you're more interested in exploring these particular issues of euthanasia, and I know you've researched what they do in Oregon.
Yeah, it really was not something of a great deal of interest to me, although one of the members of our writers group did have her sister go out to Oregon in order for her to participate in the Death with Dignity program. And when she described the process, it was a very beautiful process. Rather than dying in a hospital in agony, and what I would think of as a pretty ugly way to go.
Yeah.
In this case, she said that there was a lady there playing a harp. All the friends and relatives were there. They could all talk with her. And then at the appropriate time, she simply took the beverage that she had, and that was it.
Well, that sounds there are certainly worse ways to go.
And but if I hadn't had that dream, I never would have gotten into this. And so after the dream, I had to somehow flesh it out. I had to come up with a story of why did he get there? How did he get there? And then how in the world does he figure it out?
Yeah.
What's going on? Because he was perfectly healthy, but they told him he was dying of a brain tumor.
Yeah.
Okay. So he had to somehow figure that out. Then somehow he had to get assistance. So that's when I brought in the attractive female attorney, who then would help him. And I'm not going to say what happened after that, whether he made it or not. But I've found it a very interesting process to simply go through that, because the whole plot takes place in just slightly over a week. I had to put together a schedule, hour by hour schedule, day by day, what was going on, so I could keep track of it.
Yeah.
And after that, it worked out quite nicely.
Well, I guess, that's the way an engineer thinks, isn't it?
Exactly. That's my engineering background, my very methodical way of doing things, and a lot of people, when they first heard I wrote a novel, they said, "Well, that must be on astronomy," because my hobby is astronomy, and I'm real big into astronomy. I'm a member of the Vermont Astronomical Society and the Southern Vermont Astronomy Group. So they thought it was going to be on astronomy. I said, "No, it's not." I said, "Well, it must be on aerospace engineering." I said, "No, it's not." So this was an entire departure from any thing in my background at all.
So how much research did you do? I don't think it's going to be blowing anything to say that there's some illegal organ harvesting.
Well, yeah, that really, in the very first page, when you read the very first page, you begin to understand that's what's going on.
Yeah.
At first, I thought I was going to make it more mysterious and the reader would have to find out. And I started down that road. but it didn't really work out well. So I thought, well, why not let the reader in on the scheme to begin with, the very first page, and then have the characters in the novel try to figure out what's going on.
Which is how you build suspense.
And that's, and really the suspenseful part about it, and the scary part is when I got done, I said, that could really happen. That could happen to me. You know, and that's what turned out to be the really frightening part about the whole thing.
Did you have to do a lot of research into the human organs market?
A little bit, not much, but I did require the assistance of a doctor friend of mine, who went through it, and most of the regiments, drug regiments in the books is completely correct. It's the way it would be done. I wondered about doing that, but you know, anyway, it turns out that's the way you would actually do it. And so the help of a professional doctor, and then the editor who actually did the editing, her husband is a nurse, and so I got that perspective as well.
No, that always helps. My mother's a nurse too.
So
retired, but
oh yeah, so that helped out a whole lot. So really, everything in it I think is believable. I had a good friend, Dr. David Levy, who is into astronomy and has written over 20 astronomy books. And he's very well known. I've seen him on television numerous times, national TV.
That's how I know the name.
Okay. And he read the book, and he said, I had just returned from the movie Gravity, and he was so upset with it because it was so Hollywood. You know, he said, I went and I picked up your book and started reading it. It was so refreshing because it was real. It was how things normally work. There was no sensationalism in it. It's really how things work in the real world. And he was just delighted, and he thought it was an excellent book. So that pleased me more than I think anything else.
Well, it's always nice to hear that. You know, in my own books, you know, I've been a journalist for years, so you know, my hero is the crime reporter for the local paper. So I try to bring as much authenticity as I can, but of course you have to have some fun too. So I've made it like the worst possible newsroom I could imagine. You know, because I've worked in them all. So what I do is well, this is true of a lot of real newspapers. Management is incompetent. You know, decisions are never made on the basis of, should we be not serving the readers? No. How much does it cost? You know, and that's one of the reasons I think the industry is in decline. But anyway, that's enough of that. So now that you've done it, what are you doing with it?
I'm mainly giving it away to my friends. And this, I hope, is the beginning of a little bit of a publicity campaign to get people interested in the book and to order it. You can simply order it online by going to northshire.com and just put in Golden Needle and you'll find it right there. So it's very easy to purchase, and it's very easy to read, and I think people will find it quite enjoyable. At least I hope they will. Certainly, it's been a real adventure for me to go into the world of fiction, and like I said, I'm really working on a couple other books which are nonfiction. And I feel much more comfortable in that arena.
Well, you don't have to make anything up.
Exactly.
You know. So tell us a little bit about those projects.
Well, one of them is a memoir called Wings Set Me Free. I started this simply as a way to have my grandchildren know me a little better. And then Nancy Wright and some of the other members of the writers group said, "We're sure enjoying this. You know, you got to go and publish that." Mm-hmm. And so I'm thinking about that.
Yeah.
What I've done is most of my adventures were around my piloting experience. I was a private pilot for over 40 years.
Oh, you got to have a few stories from that.
And so I have a lot of neat stories. So what I've done is put together a bunch of snapshots. Mm-hmm. And most of them are just 1 or 2 pages, 3 pages at the most, about some incident that happened. They're not all flying, but I would say 70% of them have to do with flying experiences.
Sure. So some of the more unusual places you've been. Tell us a little bit about that. I think you can spare a story or two.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm just finishing one about a Western vacation we took some years ago. My ex-wife and my 2 boys at the time were teenagers, and mm-hmm. we went out west. I was going to a technical meeting in Seattle, mm-hmm. and I was living in Tennessee at that time.
Oh, where?
In Tullahoma, Tennessee.
Okay. How close is that to Chattanooga?
It's about halfway between Chattanooga and Nashville.
Oh, okay.
Nobody knows where Tullahoma is, but
including me. My son's maternal family is in Chattanooga.
Oh, okay. Well, there's a big Air Force installation down there, billions of dollars worth of test facilities. So I was down there as an engineer, test engineer, and mm-hmm. then a manager after that. So we took off from there and went out west to Colorado, and then ended up in West Yellowstone and went to Yellowstone Park, and then got back to West Yellowstone and took off heading for Seattle. But because I didn't have enough fuel, I wanted to have a fuel stop in Ontario, Oregon, mm-hmm. which was just mostly directly west. So as I took off, I saw broken clouds, and then the clouds got closer and closer together. And I realized I was going to be under those clouds with very big rocky mountains mm-hmm. between. So I decided, well, maybe I better go up above them.
Yeah.
So I climbed up above, and I was at 13,000 feet. Every now and then I'd see the peak of a mountain mm-hmm. sticking through, you know. And I was there for well over an hour, just suspended in space, so to speak, mm-hmm. between the clouds and the clear blue sky above. And I knew if anything happened to that airplane and I had to descend, I'd have to descend through those clouds and not know what in the world was down there. So it was, in a sense, a life and death situation. Uh-huh. But I had confidence in my airplane, and luckily I made it to Ontario, and the clouds broke up just like the forecast, and everything worked out okay.
Oh, wonderful.
So that's just one of the stories of many. And I had many interesting adventures throughout the years and flying. And so that was mainly how I got to enjoy my adult life, I guess you'd say. Mm-hmm. You know, there's the drudgery of everyday life, and then when you can get out and fly and have experiences like that, it was really neat.
Oh yeah, yeah. I love getting up in a small plane. Actually, about 10 years ago, I had a similar experience. Are you familiar with the Collins Foundation?
No.
They're an historic preservation group, and they preserve old aircraft. And the last B-2 bomber from World War II, still able to fly, is one of theirs. And they took a bunch of us up in it. You know, all the equipment is still. It doesn't work, of course. You're never going to fire those machine guns again, or drop any bombs.
Yeah.
But you got a real feel for what it must have been like in there. It's cramped. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know, there's got nothing to protect you from the engine noise.
Yeah. Yes.
And it does bring you an insight you just don't get anyplace else. Not to mention some great aerial shots that I got for the newspaper I was working for at the time. And what's the other book you're working on?
Well, the other one is, I guess you'd call it more spiritual development. My first book that came out when I was a Catholic, was called The Born Again Catholic. And that went through 8 printings before I then had it picked up by Print on Demand, iUniverse. And they're still publishing it. I'm still getting royalties. So and that came out in 1980.
Wow.
So that's been a long history with that book. So this new book has to do with more, I'd say, spiritual development is the best way of putting it. It's kind of complex, and it would be hard to explain in just a few words. But anyway, it's coming along.
So basically, you're talking about your spiritual journey since 1980.
Yes.
So I assume things have changed and developed in the last 34 years.
Changed quite a bit. Well, like I said, I'm a Unitarian now rather than a Catholic, and things have changed quite a bit. And this relates a lot of my experiences and my research, so to speak, into spiritual matters, looking at not only classical Christian things, but also Buddhist, New Age, everything. I looked at the entire gamut of spiritual development, and from that, I think derived some interesting conclusions. So hopefully that book will be coming out one of these days.
So what is your general method for writing? Are you one of those people who's got to be at the keyboard every single day, or when the mood strikes, or when you have some spare time?
I discipline myself to be at the keyboard 1 hour every day, Monday through Friday. I take weekends off and I take holidays off, and if I go on vacation, like my partner and I sometimes go cruising and things like that, so I take those times off. But other than that, when I'm normally at home, 1 hour at least per day working at some writing project. I think that's necessary to keep you in the groove.
Well, yes, I would agree. You have to. You've got to get something down. You've got to get your fingers on those keys every single day, because if you don't, your subject matter rots like everything else. If you don't do it, it's not going to get done. And then of course, you've made the mistake of telling somebody. So it's going into the 5th year now. When are you going to finish that novel? It's art, man.
Yeah.
It comes when it comes.
Well, that's the thing with that book. I was into that book, and then the novel came along. So the novel was a detour for a couple of years, working on this and other writing projects, but mainly this. So this was a detour from my real love, which was that book on spiritual development. And of course the memoirs too. I've been doing that, and as I said, the writers group just loves to hear these flying stories. So a lot of them are humorous. I tried to put a lot of humor as much as I could.
Oh, absolutely. You got to tell funny stuff
in the book. So I think I probably will end up self-publishing that memoir. And
well, shop it around a little first. You never know. You might get lucky.
Yeah, could be. Certainly, I'll come back again and tell you about that when I finish it.
Absolutely, because that's what this show is. Just to remind the viewing audience, we talk to writers, we talk to librarians, we talk to anybody who wants to talk about books. So if anyone watching here wants to be a guest and you've got something interesting to say about what you're reading, or you want to deliver book reviews, I've been pondering having people coming on to do that. By all means, just go to seitzbooks.com and hit the contact page, and we'll talk about it. So, shameless plug. Thank you. Thank you, Al. So, what else is on your mind?
Well, a lot of people wonder, exactly what I was doing when I was an aerospace engineer in the Air Force Research Laboratory. And this thing here says Future X. I was working with NASA on a program which we call the 3rd generation launch vehicles. And this was to use irregular